What happens when America's sweetheart completely snaps on live television and refuses to back down from one of Britain's most beloved comedians? It only took 23 seconds for the Kelly Clarkson Show to turn into absolute chaos, and what happened next will leave you speechless. Before we get into this insane confrontation, make sure you subscribe to our channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell because you won't believe what we uncover next. Last night's episode of The Kelly Clarkson Show was supposed to be a lighthearted conversation with Rowan Atkinson, the legendary actor best known for playing Mr. Bean and his incredible comedic genius that has entertained millions of people across the globe for decades. The audience was buzzing with excitement, ready to hear funny stories and watch Kelly's infectious energy bounce off one of comedy's greatest minds. Parents had brought their kids who grew up watching Mr. Bean clips on YouTube. Comedy fans were eager to hear behind-the-scenes stories. Everyone expected a fun, memorable show. But what started as a friendly chat turned into one of the most uncomfortable and explosive moments in daytime television history, a confrontation that nobody saw coming and that would leave everyone in that studio absolutely stunned. Kelly opened the show with her usual warmth and enthusiasm, practically bouncing in her seat as she introduced Rowan to thunderous applause. She was gushing about how much she loved his work growing up, how she used to watch Mr. Bean episodes over and over with her family on lazy Sunday afternoons. She talked about his brilliant physical comedy that transcended language barriers and made people all over the world laugh without saying a single word. She mentioned his other work too, from Blackadder to his role in Love Actually, praising his versatility and talent. And she told him how excited she was to finally meet him after all these years of being a fan. Rowan smiled politely, nodding along with that understated British charm he's famous for, seeming relaxed and comfortable in his chair. Everything appeared completely normal, just another celebrity interview on a successful talk show. They chatted about his early career, his time studying at Oxford University, where he got his master's degree, and the creation of Mr. Bean that made him a household name worldwide. Rowan was charming in his understated British way, telling amusing anecdotes about filming the show, the challenges of physical comedy, and how he came up with some of Mr. Bean's most iconic moments. Kelly was laughing genuinely, leaning back in her chair, clearly enjoying the conversation. The audience was fully engaged, laughing at all the right moments, appreciating the rare glimpse into the mind of a comedy legend. And the energy in the studio felt light and fun and exactly what a daytime talk show should be. But then Kelly decided to shift the conversation towards something more current, something more serious, and that's when the entire mood changed in an instant. "So, Rowan, I want to ask you about something you said recently," Kelly began, her tone shifting slightly from playful to serious. You could see her posture change, her smile becoming more measured. "You've been pretty vocal in interviews about your concerns with what you call cancel culture and freedom of speech. You've defended comedians who've made jokes that a lot of people found really offensive, really hurtful. Can you explain that to me? Because I have to be honest, I'm struggling to understand how defending hurtful comedy is the same as defending freedom of speech. Help me understand where you're coming from on this." The smile faded from Rowan's face almost immediately. He sat up straighter in his chair, and you could see his expression change from relaxed and friendly to guarded and defensive in an instant. The shift was so sudden that even Kelly seemed to notice it, pulling back slightly. "Well, Kelly, I think you're oversimplifying what I've actually said on this topic," Rowan responded, his voice becoming more formal, more measured. "I'm not defending hurtful comedy, as you put it. I'm defending the fundamental principle that comedy should be allowed to push boundaries, to challenge assumptions, to make people think, without comedians living in constant fear of losing their careers over a joke that someone somewhere finds offensive. There's an important distinction there." Kelly leaned forward, and anyone who watches her show regularly knows that when she leans forward like that with that particular look in her eyes, she's not letting something go. She's digging in. "But Rowan, some of the comedians you've specifically defended made jokes about marginalized communities, trans people, immigrants, people who are already vulnerable, already facing discrimination. They punch down at people with less power than them. And you, someone with your massive platform and incredible influence, stood up for them publicly. How is that not hurtful? How is that not you essentially saying their right to make a joke is more important than the actual people they're hurting with those jokes? Rowan's jaw tightened visibly. You could see his hands gripping the arms of his chair. I think you're conflating two completely different things here, and I think you're doing it deliberately. I can defend someone's right to make a joke without necessarily agreeing with the content of that specific joke. That's what freedom of expression actually means in practice. It means protecting speech you personally disagree with, speech that makes you uncomfortable, speech that challenges your worldview, because the alternative to that is far more dangerous to society as a whole. More dangerous than telling marginalized people that their pain doesn't matter? Kelly shot back immediately, her voice rising slightly. You could hear the passion building in her tone. More dangerous than giving a platform to people who spread harmful stereotypes that actually affect people's lives. More dangerous than normalizing bigotry by laughing at it. I'm sorry, Rowan, but I don't buy that argument. I don't buy it at all. Rowan's British politeness was starting to crack around the edges. His voice got sharper. With all due respect, Kelly, and I mean that sincerely, I don't think you fully understand the implications of what you're suggesting here. You're essentially arguing for censorship based on subjective determinations of what's harmful. Who gets to decide what's too offensive? Who draws those lines? Who gets to be the arbiter of what's acceptable? Because once you start down that road, once you give someone that kind of power, where does it end? How do we stop it from going too far? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was definitely not the fun, light-hearted interview they'd signed up for. You could see people exchanging glances, unsure if they should be enjoying this or concerned about where it was going. Kelly's face was flushing now, and you could hear the frustration building in her voice with every word. I think the people being hurt by the jokes get to decide, Rowan. I think when trans people say that jokes dehumanizing them are harmful and contribute to violence against their community, we should listen to them. I think when people of color say that racist jokes aren't funny and perpetuate stereotypes that get them killed, we should believe them. I think when immigrants say that jokes portraying them as criminals or terrorists make their lives harder and more dangerous, we should take that seriously. It's not complicated. It's called empathy. It's called basic human decency. And I think you're being incredibly naive about this, Rowan responded, his voice noticeably sharper now, cutting through the studio. The polite veneer he'd maintained for the first part of the interview was completely gone. Empathy is important, certainly, but so is the ability to laugh at ourselves, to challenge ideas that make us uncomfortable, to push back against orthodoxy and groupthink. Comedy has always been about transgression. It's always been about saying the things people think but don't say out loud. If we sanitize it to the point where no one can ever be offended, where every joke has to pass some kind of sensitivity test, we've killed what makes comedy powerful in the first place. We've turned it into propaganda. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kelly's band members looked uncomfortable. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent, and Kelly herself looked like she was about to explode. Transgression? Is that what we're calling it now? When someone makes a joke about how trans women aren't real women, that's transgression. When someone does an entire bit dehumanizing immigrants, that's pushing boundaries. Give me a break. Rowan stood up slightly in his seat, not fully standing but clearly agitated. You're putting words in my mouth that I never said. I never defended jokes that dehumanize anyone. What I defended was the right of comedians to explore difficult subjects without being destroyed for it. There's a massive difference between a joke that challenges people's thinking and one that's purely hateful, and you're refusing to acknowledge that difference. Kelly wasn't backing down. Her voice was getting louder, more passionate. No, what I'm refusing to acknowledge is this idea that comedians are somehow special, that they get a pass to say whatever they want without consequences. Everyone else has to think about how their words affect people. Why should comedians be exempt? Because they're funny? Because it's just a joke? That's bullshit, and you know it. The audience gasped. Kelly rarely swore on her show, and when she did, it meant she was really upset. Rowan's face went red. Now, You're being deliberately obtuse. No one is saying comedians should be exempt from consequences. What I'm saying is that the consequences should be proportionate and that social media mobs shouldn't have the power to destroy someone's career over a joke they didn't like. That's not accountability. That's vigilante justice. Vigilante justice, Kelly repeated, her voice dripping with disbelief. People expressing their opinions about harmful content is vigilante justice. People saying they won't support comedians who spread bigotry is vigilante justice? Rowan, do you even hear yourself right now? You sound like someone who's so protected by privilege that you can't even comprehend what it's like to be on the receiving end of these jokes. That's when Rowan really lost his composure. He pointed at Kelly, his finger shaking. Don't you dare talk to me about privilege. I've spent 40 years building a career in comedy. I've faced rejection, criticism, and failure. I've worked incredibly hard to get where I am. And now you're sitting there in your American talk show, making millions, telling me that I don't understand struggle? That I can't have an opinion on how comedy should work because of some perceived privilege? Kelly stood up now too, and the two of them were facing each other across the coffee table. Yes, Rowan, that's exactly what I'm saying. Because your struggle to make people laugh doesn't compare to the struggle of people fighting for their basic human rights. Your fear of being canceled doesn't compare to trans kids being bullied because of jokes that normalize hatred toward them. Your discomfort with criticism doesn't compare to the real harm these jokes cause. Rowan was shaking his head, his voice rising to match hers. You're conflating comedy with advocacy, and they're not the same thing. A joke is not a political statement. A joke is not an endorsement of behavior. A joke is a moment of levity, of absurdity, of seeing the world from a different angle. When you strip away that distinction, when you make every joke a moral test, you destroy the entire art form. Then maybe some parts of that art form need to be destroyed, Kelly shouted, and the studio went completely silent. You could hear a pin drop. Maybe if your art form requires hurting vulnerable people to survive, it doesn't deserve to survive. Maybe we need to evolve past the idea that punching down is acceptable just because someone calls it comedy. Rowan laughed, but it was a cold, bitter laugh. Evolve? You mean conform? You mean submit to whatever the loudest voices on social media decide is acceptable this week? That's not evolution, Kelly. That's cowardice. That's giving up the fight for genuine artistic expression because you're afraid of being called names online. Kelly's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. I'm not afraid of anything, Rowan. What I am is tired. I'm tired of privileged people defending their right to hurt others and calling it freedom. I'm tired of watching people I love and care about be reduced to punchlines. I'm tired of having to explain over and over why basic human decency should matter more than getting a laugh. Then maybe you're in the wrong business, Rowan said coldly. Because entertainment, real entertainment, has always involved pushing people's buttons. It's always involved making people uncomfortable. If you want everyone to feel safe and comfortable all the time, go work for a corporate HR department, not a talk show. The look on Kelly's face was one of absolute fury. Her voice dropped low, dangerous. Get off my show, Rowan blinked. Excuse me. I said get off my show, Kelly repeated, louder this time. I don't have to sit here and be told that caring about people makes me unfit to do my job. I don't have to platform someone who thinks being offensive is more important than being kind. So please, leave. Right now. Rowan stared at her for a long moment, and you could see the wheels turning in his head. Was she serious? Was this really happening? The crew members were frozen, cameras still rolling, capturing every second of this unbelievable confrontation. Finally, Rowan straightened his jacket with sharp, angry movements. Fine. Absolutely fine. I should have known better than to expect a nuanced conversation from American daytime television anyway. There's the door, Kelly said, pointing toward the exit. Her hand was shaking, but her voice was steady. And for the record, Rowan, I don't need lessons in nuance from someone who thinks defending hurtful comedy makes him some kind of free speech warrior. What it makes you is someone who's never had to worry about being the target of those jokes. Rowan grabbed his water bottle from the table and started walking toward the exit, but he couldn't resist turning back one more time. You know what your problem is, Kelly? You're so desperate to be seen as one of the good ones, so desperate to prove. You're on the right side, that you've lost the ability to think critically. You've traded intellectual honesty for applause from people who'll turn on you the second you step out of line. Kelly walked toward him, closing the distance between them. My problem? My problem is that I actually give a damn about people. My problem is that I can't pretend that jokes exist in a vacuum, that words don't have consequences, that laughter doesn't come at a cost. If that makes me less intellectually honest in your eyes, I can live with that. What I can't live with is pretending that cruelty is acceptable just because someone's talented enough to make it funny. Rowan shook his head one final time. Then I feel sorry for you. I genuinely do. Because you're going to spend your life walking on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing, and you're going to call that progress. But it's not progress, Kelly. It's regression. It's fear masquerading as virtue. Get out, Kelly said, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute finality. Just get out. And he did. Rowan Atkinson walked straight through the studio, past the shocked audience members who didn't know whether they were allowed to applaud or boo or do anything at all. He didn't look back. He didn't wave. He just walked out of that studio and disappeared through the exit door, leaving Kelly standing alone on her stage, breathing hard, her face flushed with anger and emotion. The cameras captured it all, the raw tension, the genuine fury, the complete breakdown of what was supposed to be a friendly celebrity interview. Kelly stood there for a moment, collecting herself, and then she looked directly at the camera. "We're going to take a commercial break," she said, her voice tight, and then they cut away, but the damage was done. That confrontation was out there, live and unedited, and impossible to take back. What happened on that stage wasn't just a disagreement between a host and a guest. It was a collision of two completely different worldviews, two different ideas about what comedy should be, what freedom of speech means, and whether kindness should ever take precedence over artistic expression. And in 23 seconds of explosive television, both of them made it clear they weren't willing to compromise, weren't willing to find middle ground, and weren't willing to back down from what they believed.